At this point, I'll invite Richard Anderson to take the controls here and introduce his guest.
Our speaker today is Randall Norris. He was born and raised in Macon, Georgia, and so he's kind of a hometown guy, not too far down the road. But he started his financial career in 1997, where he worked for a couple of big corps to help with retirement plans, 401ks, and stuff like that. And in 2006, Randall started on with Smith, Banner, Groover in Macon. He's still helping with retirement plans, and he's focused more on individuals, helping individuals for his retirement. And with that, I give you Randall Norris.
Thank you, guys. Can everybody hear me? I'm kind of loud anyway, so that works. Hopefully it'll make everybody feel a little bit better that I don't want to talk to you guys about selling you anything. You like that? I hope so. What Richard asked me to do was to talk about some of the things that we run into at the firm that retirees or near retirees are facing that we wish they had done differently, that they had planned differently. Struggles that they're facing now and things you guys might be able to address now before you get to retirement, or some things you may still be able to change in your retirement years. Let me mention a couple of little things about Smith, Brown, and Groover, though. How many of you guys are familiar with us? Have you heard our name? Fantastic. We've been in Macon doing retirement planning and personal investing since 1933. We have quite an extensive amount of experience right there in that firm. I did bring some cards. If you would like to talk to me individually, grab a card and email me. Happy to talk with you one-on-one. First of all, you've heard this 100 times and I'm going to tell you again. Have a will. You would not believe the people that come into the office rolling over $250,000, $500,000, $1 million in their 60s and 70s, and they don't have a will. That's incredibly frustrating from a planning standpoint. I'll give you a couple of examples. One in the news right now, it's believed that Prince didn't have a will. That's incredible. How do you get into that sort of financial situation and not plan any better than he did with regard to what happens to your money when you pass? And then I'll use a personal example that can serve a couple of functions here. I lost probably my favorite client last year, and he was 70 years old when he died. His wife was a good bit younger, is a good bit younger. He had a will. He had about $1 million with me. He had planned all his life. He was a farmer in South Georgia, by the way, someone that most of us around here can relate to. He died in October of last year. In January of last year, he changed his will. His wife, his widow, is still a client of mine and was a client prior to the death. His niece and his nephew and his mom prior to her passing were all clients of mine. Really, really good South Georgia people, and I'm still very close to all of them. The niece, the nephew, and the widow are now suing one another. All of that could have been avoided, probably, had my client set those three groups of people, niece, nephew, and widow, down at the time he changed the will, explain the reasoning and what he was doing and why he was doing it. He didn't do that. I'm still kind of frustrated with him at this point because three of my really, really good clients are suing one another, and it's turned into a pretty big fight. Don't allow that kind of thing to happen. Have a will, have it very, very clear. If you make any changes to it, explain those changes to the interested parties. And do it now. Don't wait until you have a health problem. And that's actually what the suit is based on. He had a health problem that the argument is he may have had a cognitive impairment when he changed the will. Don't let that happen. Be proactive. Do it now. Another thing that we wish people would do ahead of time is if there's a need for life insurance, handle that need way, way ahead of time. Go ahead and handle your life insurance needs while you're still healthy. I hope this goes without saying, but if you have an employer-sponsored plan where you work, particularly if there's a match into the 403B, 401K, 457 for government employees, contribute. Put money in your plan at work. Plan for your retirement. Social Security and any sort of pension is not going to be enough for most of us. We have to have more money than those are going to provide to have a comfortable retirement. That's another point. In some parts of the country, and it may be the case here in Middle Georgia, a number of companies still have pension plans. Learn about your employer's pension plan if one is offered. Thank you. Pension plans can be pretty complicated, particularly with regard to the formula that goes into how the income stream is calculated once you retire. Figure that out ahead of time. You need that information years before you get near your retirement date. It makes my job a lot easier as a planner when you come into the door and say, this is how my pension plan works. Now I have to solve for a couple of needs instead of lots of needs. I also hope this goes without saying, don't touch your retirement savings. As you build up retirement savings, particularly in qualified plans, 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, don't touch that money until retirement. The IRS makes it incredibly painful, and the later you are in your retirement planning when you touch that money, the harder it is to make up ground. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. It's there for your retirement. I'll use a personal anecdote here. I often run into clients that say something like, I can't afford to put anything more away from my own retirement plan because I'm helping my children fund their college. I hear that very often. I understand the desire to help your loved ones progress in their own life. However, there are no loans available for your retirement. When I was in college, I worked my way through college. I had a job. It took me a little longer to complete college than it would ordinarily because I was taking classes part-time and working part-time. That's the price you have to pay. There are no ways to get through your retirement on loans. Student loans are available, and working through college is an option. But do contribute to your retirement plan. Don't touch those savings. Before you get to your retirement years, assess your debt. We have a lot of people come in the office with a little bit of retirement savings and a whole lot of debt, and they want to retire 2 years from now. That math doesn't work. I'm sorry. So address your debt as early as possible. Richard and Nan came to a program that I did here in Cochran a number of years ago. And one of the topics of that particular program was something called a credit freeze. I'll mention it briefly here. If you're not familiar with that, the ability you have to place a freeze on your credit bureaus, familiarize yourself with that. You can essentially lock your credit reports down where no one, including you, no one can access your credit file for the purposes of applying for a loan, unless the person trying to access that file has the super secret 10-digit codes that the credit bureaus give you to access those. I have a freeze on my credit, and I have for many years. It works beautifully. It's another way I protect in assessing my debt, it's a way I protect myself from harm that others can do to my credit bureau. Along those same lines, if you don't know this, I ran into this just in the last 2 months, and it's a pretty important issue. your credit score, even if you're debt free and you say, I don't care about my credit score, what I need a freeze on my credit bureau is for. Your credit score impacts your life in ways that you probably don't even realize, like the cost of your homeowner's insurance and your automobile insurance. You may be debt-free and not have a care in the world about what your credit score is from the perspective of debt or interest rates. It's still impacting the cost, your cost of living, even if you don't realize it. So keep close watch on your credit. We have lots of people come in the office with a credit score that's in the toilet, a debt problem, and they're trying to fund their retirement. Those things don't mesh well together. I also have never had someone come in the office, not a single time, that was set retirement-wise. They came in with much more money than they needed to make it through their retirement years in combination with a terrible credit score. It's never happened. So mind your debt, mind your credit score, and fund those plans. Okay, people often ask, how do I know if I have enough money to retire? And so I'll give you a couple little points. You can massage this to your own situation. But here's a quick and dirty way, a thumbnail version of how you can calculate that. Every one of us gets those little Social Security notices in the mail every year. It tells you what your benefit will be at a particular age, how much you paid over the years. Figure out what your benefit is. And believe it or not, Social Security Administration is relatively responsive to phone calls. We've had good experiences with clients contacting Social Security Administration to get answers to questions. So if you can't locate your letter that came in the mail, contact Social Security Administration. They're pretty responsive. Figure out what your income stream will be from Social Security. If there are two of you, husband and wife in the household, figure both. Add any pension benefits you may be getting from an employer pension plan, current employer or previous employer. You may be vested in some old plan. Look into that. Add any income streams that you'll be getting that might be a little unusual, like rental homes, property you're leasing out, farmland, whatever the case may be. Any annuity income streams you may be receiving, add that in. Then take your personal savings that is earmarked for retirement. That would be a bank account that happens to be qualified, meaning an IRA, let's say a savings account, CDs, anything that's qualified, anything that's designed for retirement, 401ks, 403bs. Take that total number that you have set aside for retirement, multiply it by 4%, and use that as an annual amount. So Social Security, unusual income like rentals, annuities, things like that, pension benefits, and 4% of your retirement nest egg on an annualized basis. That will tell you approximately how much income you can plan on in retirement. Then calculate your expenses, what you believe your expenses will be. If that's enough, great. If not, you need to make some changes. Now, if it's not enough, it's not necessarily a catastrophe. Consider these possibilities. Cut your spending today and save more. If you're 6 or 8 or 10 years away from retirement, it's amazing what you can do cutting expenses, getting rid of some debt, and saving a little more in 10 years' time. So that's an option. People don't like hearing this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Work a little bit longer. That's always an option. That happens more and more and more in our office. Often not because someone hasn't funded their retirement heavily enough, but because the person we're talking to just wants to work a little longer. People are living longer now. Working a little longer in life doesn't seem all that terrible. Start thinking about a retirement that doesn't involve round-the-world trips. A little more realistic retirement that involves trips nearby. A little less traveling, a little less extravagant. This is a biggie. Free up some of the equity in your house. That may mean lots of ways to do that, but that may mean getting rid of the house you raised 3 or 4 or 5 children in and going to something a little smaller, a little lower cost. Certainly an option. This is a biggie. Healthcare is becoming more and more and more expensive. That's not news to any of you guys. Get as healthy as possible. That's a very significant way to lower your out-of-pocket expense when you're in your retirement years. The healthier you are, the less money you're going to spend on health problems. Just logical. Delay your Social Security. Most people are unaware of how this works. If you decide to work a little longer and not take Social Security at the earliest possible date, the amount your Social Security check will go up per year you delay is roughly 8%. Anybody here know how to get a guaranteed 8% rate of return? I've been doing this for 20 years and I don't know of anybody to do that. So basically a guaranteed 8% increase in your income if you will just delay each year. Okay. Another possibility is those retirement savings you have set aside, your personal savings, 401ks, bank accounts, whatever the case may be. If the 4% distribution rate is not getting it for you, it's not getting you to the point you need in income, you may consider structured products that guarantee a higher payout than 4%. Those do exist. Something any financial planner can help you with. Things that guarantee a higher rate of payout than 4%. 4% is a great rule of thumb, but there are possibilities out there. Okay, now, this has always been humorous to me, and I'll use some personal anecdotes here as well. But we deal with a lot of people that are already retired. And what we have learned in conversation with these folks, many of them were not truly psychologically ready to retire. They thought that's what they wanted, but it didn't really work out the way they dreamed. So as you're in those last few years leading up to when you think you want to retire, become very introspective and begin thinking about, am I truly ready for this on a psychological basis? Some of the things you might keep in mind are, what's your mission after you retire? What are your goals? How are things going to be different than when you were going to work every day? What are you going to do with your time? All of a sudden, you're going to have a lot more time on your hands than you did have. My parents are a great example of this. They're both retired. They got very, very involved in their church and very involved in their community, and Lord knows I don't know how they ever worked. They stay as busy now as I do, and they're pushing 80. Another personal anecdote here. Think about your relationships. How are they going to change once you enter retirement? I'll give you an example. I bought a house a number of years ago, and it had a pretty nice sprinkler system under all the sod, but I had some additional sod laid, and I needed another 28 sprinkler heads and 1,500 feet of PVC. So a neighbor told me about someone that would do this work for me at a pretty good price. So I called this particular gentleman, and he came to the house. He was the third person that I had come give me a quote on it. The first two were professional landscaping companies. One gave me a quote of $2,800, another gave me a quote of $3,100 to do this work. I wasn't happy with either quote, mind you. So I called this other gentleman. He happened to be retired from UPS. He was 70 years old. And we talked a lot about it. Really wonderful guy. His only caveat to the job was he would not do the trenching because he was 70 years old and didn't want to pull a trencher around. So he told me if I can find someone to do the trenching after he painted all the lines on the clay, that he would do it, materials included, for $800. I said, I'll find somebody to do the trenching. Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about it. It struck me as very odd that he was so much less expensive than these other folks, and he came very highly recommended. He wasn't doing a terrible job. Come to find out, his wife was also retired, and he didn't want to spend all day in the house with his wife. So he installed sprinkler systems very, very inexpensively just to get out of the house. So what are you going to do with all the time? And think about your relationships. So it's real. We see it every day. And a point I made a little bit ago is why retire? I'll use myself as an example again. I used to fantasize about retiring at about 50 or 55 years old. Well, I'll be 45 in a couple of weeks, and I can tell you, even if I could retire at 50 or 55, I don't want to. Why would I? I love what I do. I don't know what I'd do with the time. Maybe that's a question you ask yourself. Why retire? Okay, now I'm going to wind down with a couple of things that you should really look into about the time you retire. Once you cross that bridge and say, I'm psychologically ready, I know what I'm going to do with my time, I have all the money in place and the ability to continue my lifestyle. When you cross that threshold and you're just entering retirement, these are things that really need to be in the forefront of your mind and you need to consider. Does it make sense to downsize? Does it make sense to go to a retirement community? My dad's a perfect example of this. Mom and Dad did not do this. They have a large yard full of plants and flowers and all this good stuff, and now Dad's pushing 80 and really has some significant back problems and health problems, and he can't maintain their property. It's become a pretty significant problem that should have been handled 15 years ago, but it wasn't. Consider that at the time you cross that threshold. You also, at about 50 or about 62, 63, 64, 65, are in the sweet spot for long-term care insurance. If that's a consideration, and Lord knows long-term care has been going up in cost just at least as rapidly as healthcare has. The inflation rate on long-term care is astronomical. If long-term care insurance is something that you feel might be appropriate for you, that 62 to 65-year-old period of time, you're in the sweet spot. Go ahead and consider a purchase then. At about 70, 71, 72, the price is going to be so expensive for long-term care, it's probably not going to be worth it, no matter what your financial situation. So consider it at that point. Also, before your failing health becomes a significant issue, go ahead and consider advance directives and healthcare power of attorneys. What very often happens, a great example was my client that died last year, the farmer. He did not address any of this. So as his health failed, and there was a significant indication of cognitive impairment, who's going to make his healthcare decisions? Go ahead and handle that at the time you're crossing the bridge into retirement. If a healthcare power of attorney and advance directives make sense for you, handle it before you have a potentially terminal problem, 15 or 20 or even 30 years down the road. Handle it at that time. So it's a convenient time to talk about those things nobody wants to talk about because they really are still a good long ways off. So consider it at that point. Things like things you might consider putting in a living will, obviously very personal decision you need to discuss with the people that are important to you. But things like do not resuscitate orders, do not hospitalize orders, do not intubate orders, things like that. Be sure your healthcare providers have a copy of any sort of advance directive you might establish. Go ahead and give it to your primary doctor for sure. Okay, if you have a trust, or if you need a trust, go ahead and address that at the time of retirement, very much like you would a will. Go ahead and handle it. Don't wait till the end. For some folks in the community, an estate plan might be something you want to address about the time of retirement. Right now, the first $5.5 million of someone's estate is excluded from estate tax issues. There may be some folks in the community that between property and money they have saved and various things have an estate worth more than $5.5 million. Address that as quickly as possible as you're approaching retirement and entering retirement. I'm going to repeat it because it bears repeating. If you don't have a will at the time you retire, get one. It's very inexpensive. I'm sure you guys have a number of attorneys here in town that would love to write a will for you. Go ahead and get that done. Aside from a healthcare power of attorney, establish a financial power of attorney. I'll use my granddad as an example here. And we've got tons on at the office where you have some money set aside. You are not penniless. There is an actual estate there. And as the cognitive ability begins to fail, who's making the financial decisions? I can tell you my granddad made some bad ones because he came from a generation, they were the Great Depression generation, my grandmother and grandfather. My grandmother had absolutely no idea what was going on in their financial life and didn't want to have an idea. That was the man's job. Well, it didn't turn out so well. Go ahead and handle, when you're still capable, all your mental faculties are in place, go ahead and establish a financial power of attorney. At least have the discussion. If a legacy is important to you, you should have been working on it for a number of years, but certainly as you enter retirement, talk to a financial professional about how to leave a legacy to your children, grandchildren, church, charity, whoever. Plan on that legacy planning at the time of retirement. This is going to be an odd one, but it's near and dear to my heart, so I'm going to share it with you guys. What are you going to do about any pets you have as you enter retirement? If you want to travel, you have to make some sort of plan. If your health is beginning to fail, you need some sort of plan. What are you going to do about pets or livestock or whatever you may have, the animals in your life? And then something I understand you guys have heard about in the past, and frankly my last item. But it makes great sense, going through this with my aunt right now, is advanced funeral planning. Go ahead and handle it. If you're 20 years away from average mortality, that's not going to be a hard discussion to have with your spouse. It's not like somebody's about to die and you're planning the funeral. Do it early. Go ahead and do some sort of prepayment or pre-planning, or at least have the discussion so that the difficult part is not falling on your loved ones as your health is failing. Go ahead and handle it. So I threw a lot of information at you guys in a real short period of time. I didn't want to keep you long. Can I answer any questions for anybody? Yes, sir.
You were mentioning the 4% withdrawal rate. Does that look solid going forward with all of the worldwide negative interest that's going on? Is that going to come to the United States?
Well, that's a great question. And for those of you guys that might not have heard it, is 4% distribution rate from your personal savings or retirement earmarks realistic going forward? I believe, and as a firm, we believe that interest rates will rise to some degree, but the entire world is in for a very, very long-term period at lower than normal interest rates. Okay? That being said, allocation is the key here. So if your entire retirement savings is in CDs, savings accounts, treasuries, something like that, 4% is not realistic. Allocation and diversification is key. You might want to consider preferred stocks, dividend payers, even some bonds, mixed in an overall balanced allocation. So by spreading your assets around into various things that have different amounts of income in terms of interest rate or in terms of distribution rate, I think 4% is still pretty realistic. But it certainly opens the idea, or opens the door to considering something that is more structured and guaranteed. Let's say something that guarantees to take the risk off of you and guarantee to pay you 4% or 5% or 6%, whatever it is, no matter how long you live. And those things are out there. So that's a great question, though. The risk is you plan on 4% and you miss it, and then you run out of money. I'll tell you the number one thing I hear in our firm. Someone comes in approaching retirement or just entering retirement, and their number one fear is running out of money before they die. It's not leaving money to the heirs or whatever, you name it. It's not even, I need $6,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 a year to go traveling on. It's, if I run out of money before I die, what am I going to do? So that's the number one thing we solve for at the firm, is being sure someone doesn't run out of money before they pass. But great question. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What about gold in the portfolio?
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
Gold?
Gold. As a rule, we do not help anyone buy gold. What we do on occasion, or any precious metal for that matter, not just gold. What we do on occasion, if it's important to someone, is we will buy a precious metals ETF, exchange traded fund, or precious metals mutual fund, if it's important to them and it's appropriate for their portfolio. And inside those ETFs and mutual funds, they may hold, obviously there are hundreds and hundreds of choices, but they may hold not only the metal itself, but they may hold the miners, they may hold the distribution channels, lots of different options inside the ETF or the mutual fund that diversifies the money, and it's not just based on the spot price of the metal. So, for the most part, I'm not pro precious metals. For the most part, there are exceptions, obviously. If someone really wanted to get into precious metals, you might consider a metal that has a industrial application, like silver, for instance. It's used in tons and tons of electronics, so there's demand out there beyond just the flight to something secure like gold or whatever the case may be in times of fear. But I hope that answers your question. By and large, we don't advocate precious metals. Any other questions? I'm not that good, guys. You have to have some other questions. No? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your time. And if you guys need me for anything, cards are right here. Thank you.